Hi there, Year 10. Welcome to your 8th lesson on A Christmas Carol. So today I want to introduce you to a whole family, but largely to Bob Cratchit in a little bit more detail. So lesson 8 titled, Who Are the Cratchits? This of course coincides with your 8th lesson that will be live on Tuesday on Edulink and Google Classroom. So do watch this first to give yourself some background knowledge. Okay, so context alert, of course, as it says here, the disabled child. Now, Tiny Tim is is Bob's youngest child. I was just looking at that image there, and of course it does give you a little bit of spoiler alert for the end of the novella. So as the youngest child, inherently he is the most vulnerable. Now within sort of the Victorian era, as I mentioned prior, there are unfortunately many records of high infant mortality rates. So lots of very young children unfortunately succumbing to premature deaths. Now that's largely a condition of their social class. Okay, the working classes just did not have access to many of the sort of systems in support systems that we take for granted today, or at least maybe not so much now, such as the welfare state and the NHS. So Tiny Tim has, it's not explicitly referenced, but has some sort of condition that does limit his mobility. So he would have been considered disabled, or unfortunately an invalid, which is a terrible term, a derogatory term, historically used to suggest, again, disabled. But when you hear that word, invalid, you hear invalid, okay, not as important, less than. So you may want to pause the slide here because there is just some little information that you're going to want to jot down as bullet points that speak about Victorian England, about its institutions, okay, so the monarchy, the government, the church, and basically the unfortunate expectation that only those individuals that were able-bodied and were working to contribute to society were therefore valued by the institutions. Okay, so this mad idea that if you were not working, even if you had a disability, you were considered idle, inferior, less than, and not contributing successfully to society. Now, Tiny Tim is a character, Year 10. Okay, he is not a real individual. However, Dickens uses this character as a tool to provoke sympathy from the reader and to really help represent those masses of vulnerable people in society that needed those that were healthy and wealthy and in privileged position to help them. So really, Tiny Tim's message is about benevolence, kindness, about community, about collective responsibility. And that didactic message is communicated through this character. Now, I have to remind you of a very hideous quotation from Scrooge in Stave 1, where he refers to all of those, he clumps them all in one big basket, all of those that don't work, the vulnerable, the working classes, as the surplus population. Okay, now when Scrooge in Stave 3 visits the Cratchit household in The Ghost of Christmas Present, the Ghost of Christmas Present very alarmingly repeats those words back to Scrooge, and he sees the errors of his immediate judgments, of his historic judgments, in calling these people, the Cratchits, calling Tiny Tim part of the surplus population. Okay, so Scrooge is given a greater awareness of the inequality of the Victorian age through his exposure to the Cratchits' Christmas, to their very meagre Christmas. Okay? So let's start with Bob Cratchit then. You might want to do this as a mind map or as a list. I'm going to rattle off some key ideas. Why is Bob Cratchit so important as a character in the novella? Number one, he is used by Dickens to symbolise the true spirit of Christmas. Obviously, the true spirit of Christmas is not materialism, is not money, is not financial gain. The true spirit of Christmas is the importance and centrality of family, of familial love, care, community, of charity. Okay, so Bob is, despite his family's predicament, despite their poverty, he is just full to the brim of benevolence and Christmas spirit, and he adores his family. Okay, so he is a foil, therefore, to Scrooge in that sense. He is cheerful and enthusiastic, and there's a wonderful quote in Stave 1 when he is given the all clear, finally, by Scrooge to go home for Christmas, and Dickens pens that he ran home as hard as he could pelt and slid on the ice 20 times in honour of Christmas. So he is cheerful and enthusiastic despite his plight. He has the characteristics that you would associate with a child. He has that spirit, that creative imagination, that playfulness, that Scrooge has all but forgot. Something that might not be obvious when you read the scene with Bob Cratchit and his family is that Bob's treatment of his wife, Mrs. Cratchit, is really telling. Now, when he interacts with his wife, he uses quite hyperbolic, over-the-top language to show his thankfulness towards her for the Christmas pudding that she has created. He labels the Christmas pudding as wonderful, and he later uses the superlative greatest to describe her pudding as the greatest achievement. Now, of course, this is very hyperbolic, over-the-top language. It's exaggeration, of course, the greatest achievement. But he means it. He means it with his whole heart, in true, genuine sense of the word. He is therefore outside of discrimination. He is not a patriarch. He's not a reigning head of the household that demands that everyone else fall in line. He treats his wife as his equal. I know she's fulfilling a domestic duty here, but it's just the friendship and the care that he uses towards her that for me displays that he is outside of the societal norms of discrimination and hierarchy. Now, what's really important to remember contextually, of course, is that at the time, in the Victorian period, Dickens was very acutely concerned about how alienating capitalism could be. Capitalism done wrong, right? We know that capitalism can work in society, and Fezziwig uses capitalism in a way that is acceptable and productive for all. But Dickens was very worried about capitalism used by society as a whole as very alienating for people. And what I mean by that is it just seemed to value money, profit, gain over anything else, over people and their welfare. Now, this scene with the Cratchits, who do not benefit from the capitalistic system, it's such a happy scene. This scene shows us that the Cratchit household is a model. It's a model microcosm for how Dickens wanted families to celebrate Christmas. It's not about gifts, and it's not about how much can we spend to prove our wealth on a sort of lavish, buffet. It's about merriment in the family, sort of microcosm. Okay, so the Cratchits household is a microcosm for how Dickens wanted people to truly celebrate Christmas. Again, pause this slide if you need to now. Okay. So just going to the Cratchits as a wider household again, despite their merriment, their Christmas spirit and their benevolence as a strong family unit, these are some positive lessons that we learn from them. There are, of course, the negative lesson that we cannot ignore. The Cratchit household is a microcosm for the rife poverty in the Victorian era. The Cratchits household helped to reinforce the themes of poverty too, okay? And the fact that there was such a class divide that needed to be remedied. So, sorry if my emails keep going off, I've forgotten to shut them, but I'm not going to end the video now, let's keep going. Dickens associates Bob Cratchit and by extension his large family of 6. By the way, it was very common in Dickens' era for working class families to have large families. Again, lack of contraceptive availabilities. They were not educated, unfortunately, to the same extent, and so procreation seemed an inevitable sort of outcome of those conditions. Anyway, Dickens associates the family, Bob's large family, with poverty and therefore the social problems of the time. Now, the Cratchits family Christmas actually contrasts quite sharply Fred's family Christmas that we see as well. So by seeing that contrast, it shows just that how huge, right, the gap between the classes were in the Victorian society. What I really love about the Cratchit family scene in the extract that you should have read for lesson 8 is that at the Cratchit family dinner, nobody remarked that it was a small pudding for a large family. Okay, so the Cratchits are so grateful, so perfectly content with their mother's efforts that none of them would dare remark that it was such a small pudding for such a large family, right? 8 people, 6 kids and, 2 parents. They would get the smallest of slices. But at Fred's Christmas, his guests are dressed finely in lace tucker. Now remember, Fred isn't a sort of aristocrat. He's not excessively wealthy, but he is very comfortable as a middle-class individual. So you can see how big that gap is between the working class and the middle class through those textual details. So with regards to the adjective small that is used to reference the pudding that Mrs. Cratchit creates, again it shows the Cratchits lack luxury and even in some instances basic necessities such as the medicine to care for Tiny Tim. But the Cratchits' enthusiasm in this scene is palpable, you can feel it, right? And it shows that even this small pudding is an indulgence to them, something that Scrooge takes for granted, again showing a real juxtaposition in their realities, and the family as a whole is a foil to Scrooge's ways. So just a grade 9 alert moment here for you as well. I found this really interesting, and I actually hadn't thought about this until about 4 years ago when a year 11 had mentioned this in her grade 9 essay. Again, I just love your ideas. If you're coming up with stuff, just please tell me. I'd love to share it as well, rather than just hearing my voice. So she noticed that Bob's name is a palindrome, and a palindrome is a name that is spelt the same front to back. B-O-B, B-O-B, right? Exactly the same. And she said that could not be an accident, right? That could be a purposeful choice from Dickens. And she said that it could symbolise how consistent he is in his good cheer, in his benevolence, in his Christmas spirit, from front to back the same. He is consistent, he has consistent love for his family. And I just love that. Such an interesting grade 9 original idea. So please make sure you pause the video and get that down for me. Okay, so this could become a little task for you if you'd like to. I know that you have your lesson 8 PowerPoint and activities going live today as well, but I just thought it was a really valuable activity that I would have done in class with you, and Sir would have done also, just to really summarise the Cratchit family from what we've said so far. So I've popped the question, how are the Cratchit family presented? Now I've done the first for you, to be honest, so you could at least write this down. I've just planned really for a paragraph on the Cratchit. So I've said here, my signpost on my point, firstly, the Cratchits are presented as amused at the prospect of Peter working in business. Now Peter is the oldest son of Mr. and Mrs. Cratchit, and he is readying himself for the world of work. So two of the younger siblings stated to have laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter being a man of business. So here Peter's readying himself for the world of work, and the younger siblings find it quite amusing to see him being dressed up or, preparing himself for that world. I think that's purposeful. It tells us something about the family as a whole. It shows that even though, the last bit here, even though the family require money to survive, for them, it's not superior, it's not more important than their happiness. They're not fixated on money and on its accumulation, on piling it up. The fact that the two young Cratchits laugh tremendously at this and this idea of him being a man of business reminds readers of Scrooge's behaviour, right, on the day of Marley's funeral, and thus proposing that unlike Scrooge, they are content without living for money. Money doesn't become part of their every waking moment as it does for Scrooge. Okay, so I have given you two other points that I've already done. Okay, they're already there about the Cratchit family, so all you need to do, it wouldn't take you long actually, is pop a quote in the middle for each of those points and just a couple of sentences telling me what it suggests about the Cratchits. Now historically I would get you to then write up two of those speed paragraphs. That again is your choice if you like to do that. It's important that you do practice your extended writing at this time at home. I know that some of you have felt you've been out of practice. We are giving you opportunities every single week to write speed or P2CW paragraphs, and you should be using that and completing that. So here is an example. You can pause the video and write this in your book if you like as a model paragraph. I know that sometimes you like to do this for your revision. And this paragraph is on how the scene of the Cratchits contrasts with Scrooge lifestyle. And it's in the contrast, really, year 10, that we learn about their importance, okay, about what we learn about them. So I'm going to leave you with that. I don't want to waffle on for any longer. I know you've got lots to do. But in essence, let me leave you with this. The Cratchits are significant because their household, although impoverished, is a hub for Christmas spirit and gratitude. And therefore, they represent true Christmas spirit and true family models for change. The Cratchits are a family that contrast in their behaviour, the behaviour of Scrooge. And they show once again models for the Victorians to embrace a fairer, kinder society. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Please feel free as ever to go back, pause the video where you need to, but that just gives you a bit of an insight into the importance of this family thus far. Thank you.